Balcony. Thank you. Susan Engel, ladies and gentlemen. Let's have some nice applause for her. So I was on the subway, and I noticed that this guy was like staring at me, right? It's weird. And I thought, well, I don't know, maybe he's seen me on TV or something like that, but just kept on staring at me. And finally, he walks right up to me, and he says, "Have you ever considered getting a nose job?" And I said, "Another one?" And he sort of backed off a little bit, kept his distance. How are you doing, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the show. Let's hear it for the 92nd Street Y. It's great to be here. I realized as I was coming over here tonight that this is my 7th year of doing shows at the Y. And I think that's a reflection of how little progress I've made in my career. I am officially in a rut. This is what a rut looks like, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, that's not true. That's not true. Well, no, the part about the rut is true. But the Y is a wonderful place. And when people ask me, like, why do you keep coming back to the Y? The answer is very simple. Coming to the Y helps me keep in touch with what America's thinking. Don't you agree? Very important in my line of work to stay in touch. Because, if you just look out at this audience tonight, this audience looks like America. You are a beautiful mosaic. You are a Hebraic mosaic. You are just... And while we're on this topic of Jews, because let's not mince words, that's what we're talking about right now. We are talking about Jews. I was raised as a Reform Jew. Do we have any Reform Jews here this evening? Oh, good. Some other people who don't know Hebrew. That's awesome. Well, if you're like me and you're a Reform Jew with kids, next week you are going to be faking the shit out of that candle routine. You know it. Don't lie. Don't be a hero. I mean, I am like Baruch Atah. Do you guys know the rest of that stuff? What is it? How does it go? Oh, stop showing off, jackass. I mean, honestly, it's like I'm Baruch Atah. Okay, kids, go find the matzah. No, that's not even the right holiday, is it? I am hopeless. I am the lamest Jew. I'm like Pharaoh up here, like I know nothing. It's, I think it was growing up Reform. Also, I grew up in the Midwest. I mean, that's not a bastion of Judaism. I grew up in Cleveland. Do we have anyone from Cleveland here tonight? Few, yes. While we're on, are you totally stoked about Johnny Manziel starting for the Browns this Sunday? Oh, you are. I always like to talk Cleveland sports with the 4 people in the audience who know about it, because I find it really alienates the other 900, and that's a great way to start the show. But I have to do it because at home, I just got to say, my wife doesn't like me talking about sports. She thinks it's boring. And, actually, my wife is here tonight. So I've actually talked about sports in front of her and dissed her in front of an audience. That's what we call a double douchebag. It's a great routine. It's a skating term. I'm very good. I nail it every time. I'm amazing. But anyway, what was I talking about? Cleveland, right? I grew up in Cleveland. And, when you grow up in the Midwest, in a town like Cleveland, you don't have, like, Jewish role models at all. I mean, like, my role models were, like, baseball players, like the Cleveland Indians, Oh, I'll tell you, that was kind of a controversial thing back then. You've been hearing all about, like, the Washington Redskins and how there's all that controversy. Well, we had that going with the Indians back in the 1970s. So we were on the cutting edge of offensiveness in Cleveland. And people were really getting up in arms about it. I remember I was around 10 years old, and I was reading the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and somebody wrote a letter to the editor complaining about this name. And I remember he said, how would people feel if they called the team the Cleveland Jews? And I thought, that would be amazing. I mean, how awesome would that be? That would be the best thing ever. And I mean, you wouldn't even have to change that much. You could still call them the Tribe, right? I mean, just be amazing. I mean, you maybe would like adjust the headlines in the paper after a game a little bit, like instead of Tribe scalps socks, it would be like Tribe alters socks. You know, that'd be okay. That would be okay. So it was a nice fantasy. I started thinking about Chief Wahoo, you know, the symbol, and he's like, Chief Wahoo, if you just took off the feather and put a yarmulke on him, he would look Jewish. You know what? He looks a little bit like me. Check it out. Right? Cleveland Jew. Amazing. So I loved this as a kid. I loved to think about this, like what a great thing that would be, a Jewish baseball team. And I remember one day, I couldn't have been more than 10 or 11. I was at a baseball game at Cleveland Municipal Stadium, and the announcer got on the PA system, and he was introducing a new player to the team. And he said, playing left field for the Indians, John Lowenstein. I could not believe it. It was like I had summoned him. It was like finally we had a real live Cleveland Jew. I was so excited. And I've got to tell you, I wasn't the only one who was excited, because when John Lowenstein came up to bat, the organist at Cleveland Municipal Stadium played If I Were a Rich Man. I am not kidding you. True story. That happened on our planet, that thing. And I loved this, and it was like his song, and for weeks, you know, they would do this. And then finally, John Lowenstein put an end to it, because he came out and he made a statement, and he said it was inappropriate for them to play this song because he was not Jewish. He was German. And I was like, dude, you believe what you want to believe, but I'm pretty sure. I've heard your song, I'm pretty sure. But if we can just stop for a moment and think about that statement he made, what he was saying basically was, it was offensive to play If I Were a Rich Man because he was German. But had he been Jewish, it would have been perfectly okay. I mean, that has good intro music for a Jew, you know? I should have had that tonight when I came out. Da-da-da-da-da-da. We all love that. It was weird. It was a weird time to grow up. I guess I had a weird childhood. I'm sure most of you think you had weird childhoods too, but I guess my parents were especially weird. My dad he still is, like super smart and intellectual. He was like, went to Harvard College, Harvard Law School, Harvard Law Review, all that stuff. And growing up with a father who is that smart, it was interesting. I mean, it was different. I'll give you an example. One time we were at dinner, and I guess I looked a little bit glum, down in the mouth, and my dad turned to me and said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Well, all the kids in school are continuously telling me that I'm queer." And in those days, queer meant just weird, you know, uncool, that sort of thing. My dad took this in, and he said, "They're not continuously telling you you're queer." They're continually telling you you're queer. Continuously would be, you're queer, you're queer, you're queer, you're queer, you're queer. Continually, you're queer, you're queer. So yeah, that was my childhood. But you know what? I feel that the damage I sustained is really better dealt with by medical professionals. So let's just stop this discussion right here. We have so much to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the year 2014, all the things that happened in the news. I have a very special guest coming on in a moment. But before we get to all that, I just have to ask, do a little market research. How many people here tonight are readers of the Borowitz report? Just a little bit of, okay. Balcony up there, you've got some readers up there? Good, okay. Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Borowitz report, it's basically fake news. That's the only way I can describe it. I just sit around and make shit up all day. That's my job. How can I describe it? It's sort of like, are you familiar with the CIA? Very similar job. Very similar kind of job. So I've been writing fake news. I've been doing it, I guess, for about 14 years now. And most people, I think, read it for what it is. They know that I'm making stuff up. But I've been surprised, and this has happened a lot this year, that there seem to be people around the world who read these stories of mine and think that they're reading real news stories. And this has happened a lot in China, for example, and it's also happened in, what's that other country? The United States of America. It happens a lot in the United States. And I see this a lot on Facebook, where people will think that they're real stories, and sometimes they're not sure. They're skeptical, and I'll give you an example. I love this. This happened this week. I wrote a story, some of you may have read it, and it was about Barack Obama meeting with Prince William to get tips on how to convert America into a monarchy. And this caused quite a hubbub on Facebook, as you can imagine. Various people debating the veracity of this story. And my favorite thing, and I've seen this a number of times on Facebook, was I was on my page and there were all the comments after, and one person wrote skeptically, "Source?" It's like a gotcha moment. And I want to say the source is me, the king of bullshit, as I am the source. I'm the source of all bullshit. But I thought it'd be interesting, before we take a look at the things that actually happened in the year gone by, I wanted to share with you 3 of the Borowitz report stories from this year that were the most confused, I think, with real news stories. A lot of people around the world thought these were real. And they're very short. I'm going to read them to you and try to see if there's any moment in this story where you might discern that they're not really true. Just put on your thinking caps. It's kind of brain teasers. Okay, now for context, because God, it's been a long year and we may not even remember some of the news pegs for these stories. That's a journalistic term, peg. But earlier in the year, Stephen Hawking had this really big pronouncement. It was sort of a big bombshell where he said that black holes in the universe, as he's been describing them for all these years, he realized don't exist. They don't exist, and they're different from what he thought they were, and he called this his biggest blunder ever. So in the Borowitz report published this story. The headline was, "Stephen Hawking's blunder on black holes shows danger of listening to scientists," says Michelle Bachmann. Now, so far, this sounds very real to me, so I understand the confusion. Okay, here's the story. Dr. Stephen Hawking's recent statement that black holes do not actually exist underscores, quote, "the danger inherent in listening to scientists," Representative Michelle Bachmann said today. Bachmann unleashed a blistering attack on Dr. Hawking, who earlier referred to his mistake on black holes as his, quote, "biggest blunder." Actually, Dr. Hawking, our biggest blunder as a society was ever listening to people like you, said Bachmann. If black holes don't exist, then other things you scientists have been trying to foist on us probably don't either, like climate change and evolution. Bachmann added that all the students who were forced to learn about black holes in college should now sue Dr. Hawking for a full refund. Fortunately for me, she said, I did not take any science classes in college. Okay, now, in fairness, one part of this story is true. Michelle Bachmann does not believe in evolution. because it's really let her down. So, I understand the confusion. Okay, this one I really find hard to believe that people thought were real, but especially in China for some reason, people really bought this one. The story here was that Bill Gates of Microsoft fame decided that he would go back to work and take a day-to-day job at Microsoft. So one day after that happened, my headline was, Gates spends entire first day back in office trying to install Windows 8.1. Should I even bother reading this? The Chinese were riveted by this story of American incompetence. Bill Gates' first day at work in the newly created role of technology advisor got off to a rocky start yesterday as the Microsoft founder struggled for hours to install the Windows 8.1 upgrade. The installation hit a snag early on, sources said, when Mr. Gates repeatedly received an error message informing him that his PC ran into a problem that it could not handle and needed to restart. After failing to install the upgrade by lunchtime, Mr. Gates summoned the new Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, who attempted to help him with the installation, but with no success. While the two men worked behind closed doors, one source described the situation as tense, adding, Bill is usually a pretty calm guy, so it was weird to hear some of that language coming out of his mouth. A Microsoft spokesman said only that Mr. Gates' first day in his new job had been, quote, a learning experience, and that for the immediate future, he would go back to running Windows 7. Okay, so widely believed as a true story. Now, this story was so believed around the world, I think it came close to creating an international incident. And again, try to see if there are any tip-offs in the story that it might not be true. The headline was, G20 ends abruptly as Obama calls Putin a jackass. This story was actually very popular in Russia, of all places, interestingly. Hopes for a positive G20 summit crumbled today as President Obama blurted to Russia's Vladimir Putin at a joint press conference, everyone here thinks you're a jackass. The press corps appeared stunned by the uncharacteristic outburst from Mr. Obama, who then unleashed a 10-minute tirade at the stone-faced Russian president. Look, I'm not just talking about Snowden and Syria, Mr. Obama said. What about Pussy Riot? What about your anti-gay laws? Total jackass moves, my friend. As Mr. Putin narrowed his eyes in frosty silence, Mr. Obama seemed to warm to his topic. If you think I'm the only one who feels this way, you're kidding yourself, Mr. Obama said, jabbing his finger in the direction of the Russian president's face. Ask Angela Merkel. Ask David Cameron. Ask the Turkish guy. Every last one of them thinks you're a dick. Source. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. That was our year. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Are you ready for the show? Are you ready? Okay. My special guest tonight differs from me in that she actually knows things that are going on in the world. She's well-informed. She's wonderful. She's one of the best people on TV and TV news. She's moved into documentaries. She's now an entrepreneur. We're going to hear more about that. She's an old friend of mine, and I'm sure beloved by many of you, Soledad O'Brien. Soledad.
Although old friend of yours, you don't say someone's an old friend of yours.
Well,
long time.
A long time, long time. You know, well, we met on television because I don't know how many people remember this, but way back when, like 10 years ago, Soledad and I were on a show on CNN together called American Morning.
Right.
It was Soledad, Bill Hemmer, Crazy Jack Cafferty, as he's known. That's his pirate name, I think.
That's the sweet name for him.
That's his sweet name. And you know, actually, I wanted to bring this up with you. In all those years of working together, I never got to address this with you. But of course, you were like the host of the show, so you were very busy, like, you know, doing news and stuff like that. And I was there to sort of provide some levity, which always works so great on cable news, because that's what people are watching the news for, to hear some idiot talking shit. And, but I was on 2 segments on the show, and they both had something in common. One was called 90-Second Pop. Right. And what that was 3 people talking about pop culture. And we had an aggregate total of 90 seconds to discuss a topic. So the first 2 were real blabbermouths, and when they would get to me, there would be about 7 seconds left, and then I think a gong would go off. Right. And then we did another one called Give Me a Minute, and there were, again, 3 people, and I was the last. And by the time they were done talking, I think there was like 2.4 seconds left. And here's my question. You guys had 3 hours on that show. Yeah. Why did I only merit an aggregate of 14 seconds on the entire broadcast?
I think it's that trying to justify doing pop culture, right? There was always a sense in cable that you had to have a nod to pop culture, but no one really wanted to do pop culture. So they do it, and it was like, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it really fast. Don't breathe, just speak really fast. And we did. We got to you with like 11 seconds. Like, oh, Andy, only have 11 seconds left. What do you think of such and such?
Right, exactly.
And we sort of squeezed it in. And why 90 seconds? I don't know.
I don't know.
It didn't have
I don't
to
know.
be that way.
All I know is that every time my mouth opened, like a clock ticked, and then I was off. It was just a very humiliating experience. But I would say currently on CNN, I am on for 0 seconds, and I think that's as it should be. I think that's. But I actually wanted to talk to you a little bit about. You are now an entrepreneur. You've been, of course, on TV for many years, but now you are producing documentaries, producing all different kinds of things. You have a new company called Starfish Media. But you must, as I do, you still watch a lot of news and cable news, right? Do you or no?
You know, I don't watch as much as I used to. I get a lot of my news, you know, when I roll out of bed, I look at my Twitter feed. I really am getting a lot of information online. I think there's a real shift. My kids who have iPads at school, they don't watch TV except for sporting events. So I think you're really seeing this massive shift in how people get information.
Well, maybe you're not the right person for me to ask this question, but it's something that I've been thinking about a lot about cable news this year. What the fuck is going on with cable news is my question. I was trying to put it as delicately as I could.
Well, I watched the clips online.
Right, the clips. Like, for example,
it's been kind of crazy.
Well, the plane, for example. I'm just curious about. You know, there was that model of the toy plane, and at one point CNN speculated that maybe the plane had gone to heaven, that God had taken the plane.
And then there was aliens.
And there were aliens.
And then there was a black hole.
So my question is, which one of those is true? I guess.
I'm going to say heaven.
Heaven, okay, heaven.
You know, it's such an interesting thing. When there's breaking news, it's like a football that you have to keep in the air as you have a ratings bump. And so I think what you see in those circumstances, everybody's like, no matter what, don't leave this topic. So if you're an anchor person and you've now been on the air for 17 days straight.
Right.
You have covered no one has found the plane. Like, there's no.
You sure?
So, well.
I mean, we've been here.
Hypothetically, so right at some point you're like, have we talked about aliens? Really? Has anybody, should we do aliens? I feel good about it. Let's do aliens.
But don't you think, you see, my concern, well, I guess my concern is twofold. One is, for me to succeed, there's got to be some kind of a clear line of demarcation between what I do and what real news people do. Do you see what I'm saying? So when I'm not going to, they're all culprits, so I'm not going to single out Ashley Banfield. But when she is up there saying, like, is Ebola the ISIS of biological agents? Or maybe she said, is ISIS the Ebola of terrorists? I can't remember. Either, of course, is a very valid comparison. But, I mean, honestly, my day is I go to the gym in the morning and I watch the news to try to riff on it. And if it's already so ridiculous, I just want to go home and curl up in a fetal position. So what my question is, you as an entrepreneur, what are you going to do? What's the Soledad O'Brien approach? How are you going to do things differently? Because you want to do things you're proud of.
I think I truly believe that there is a space for thoughtful conversations around issues. We just finished a documentary that really started with the killing of Eric Garner. And it just happened to be timed to the exact time that the grand jury decided to come down with no indictment. And so we were able to have an hour-long documentary looking at the NYPD, and really thoughtful. It had the commissioner, it had black police officers. We got to be embedded with the police officers as they were going through the most dangerous neighborhoods. We talked to young men who'd been stopped and frisked, one guy 100 times, a 19-year-old kid, and really get a sense of like what is happening. And so I think, in a way, the more over the top and crazy some of the stuff is, that people are sort of looking for, where is the thoughtful conversation about things that they care about? So I think we have kind of a good niche, but there are definitely times, there was a story on the other day about beard transplants. You must have, yeah. No, I'm not, that's true. I mean, really, like there was a news item about, and I remember I was
beard transplants?
Yeah, for men who have scruffy beards. Like if you feel like your beard is not, whatever the word is, you could get a transplant. You could get hair transplanted into your beard. So you have and I was at the gym watching that, and I remember thinking like, thank you, God, that I am not on TV right now. Like I am so glad that I do not have to do the crosstalk on the scruffy beard story.
That actually is the first story we've talked about tonight that I think is really interesting. I mean, I think everything else you've touched on, yes, timely and all, but man, if you could have someone else's beard, that would be amazing, I think.
Apparently
it depends on who. I mean, I'm seeing some I wouldn't want tonight, but yes, if it's a quality beard, God, that's a great story.
It's a real thing.
It's a great story.
And they spent a lot of time on it.
Right. Who was covering the beard? Do you remember who it was?
Everybody covered
the beard story.
Yeah, everybody
all over
covered
that.
the beard story.
Well, it's been a very slow news month, Soledad, so you can understand. You can understand why they would need to go to the beard story. After the Star Wars trailer came out, there really hasn't been much substantive stuff going on. So just because I think I would like to see it and our audience would like to see it, where did your documentary air? It
aired on CNN, and we've been taking it on the road as well. But we'll probably have it on Netflix soon. I mean, it's just been a great conversation starter around, the issues that people are talking about right now. What do you do in communities that have a lot of crime? And how do you, to what degree can you stomp on people's civil rights? Is arresting someone or stopping and frisking them 5 times fine? 10 times? 25? Like, where's the line between protecting a community that wants to be protected, but also making sure you're not casting a net that captures everybody who fits the description, which is sort of every 19 to 25-year-old young black man. Right. And it's a complicated, conversation. So
well, you've been doing documentaries for a long time. Your Black in America series, you were kind of, this has been a big topic for you. And one thing I want to touch on, this is a personal thing, but I did want to touch on I talked a little bit about my ethnicity in the opening. I'm Jewish. I don't know if you were aware of that, but I shared that tonight. But you have a much more interesting, your background's range. I lose track of exactly all the branches of your family, but you are Black, Cuban, and Irish.
Yeah, my mom is Black and Afro-Cuban, and she came to this country in the late 1950s and met my dad, who's white and Australian, and his parents had come from Ireland during the potato famine. So, on the census, I just check everything, because why not?
My question for you was, why not Jewish? Like, you're everything else, and it just seemed like sort of an oversight, like all these people are getting together, da-da-da-da-da-da. Isn't there room for any, why wasn't somebody at the party where all that
Second
beautiful...
marriage. That's what I'm planning for.
Second marriage. That's good. Well, no, I was just curious. I guess that wasn't really appropriate. But, I've got to say, you are in the media, so you're kind of an honorary Jew, so we accept you as that. That's a good thing. You extend our control, our hammerlock over the industry, and that's important.
I accept.
You accept graciously. But, you know, the issues of race, because I like to start with a really funny topic that we're all laughing about. It's, you know, it's fascinating to me because one thing I wanted to talk about tonight is I want to talk about sort of, and this sounds maybe counterintuitive to people who think I'm always complaining and tearing down, which I seem to be sometimes. But I think the reason why I do what I do is because I'm actually an optimist, and I'm always disappointed in what I see as poor behavior from our politicians and people like that. So I'm always looking for the good, the happy news. And I feel like sort of a good news story this year was gay marriage. I felt like not just some of the decisions and, you know, the spreading legality of gay marriage, and also marijuana, the spreading legality of marijuana.
My favorite thing was watching news anchors cover the marijuana story, right? Because they were trying to figure out, do they like mention that they smoke pot? Do they like not? It's just a straight news story. They really had a hard time delivering your typical marijuana story.
Right. Well, they would have to talk in that sort of news anchor detachment if they hadn't done it. Now, marijuana cigarettes, also known as joints, will become available. But I bring up these two things because, you know, marijuana is not, look, it's just a drug. We have other legal drugs, you know, tobacco, caffeine, alcohol, the crack and meth that this crowd likes to use. But though I guess those aren't legal.
I was going to say.
But, you know, I felt like the gay marriage story was a positive story, not just because of the changes in laws and the judicial decisions, but those things seem to trail a general feeling in society of acceptance, that people, not everybody, but a majority and an increasingly large majority of people are saying, like, I'm either in favor of gay marriage or I really don't care who gets married. I mean, just leave it alone. And I feel like, okay, that's great. We're seeing some progress here. But then I felt like in race relations, this was a tough year. Like I felt it was, I was looking for the same kind of glimmers of hope or things to be hopeful about, and I wasn't finding that as much.
Yeah, you know, I actually think what has been interesting for me to watch is to see all these young people, not the protesters who are out there like smashing windows, but just the protests in New York City were pretty calm. I mean, the protest, I mean, it was, I got stuck in a couple of them, and the protesters would wave at you, and they were young. And I thought, when's the last time you'd seen a bunch of people, they were very diverse, the protesters, the group was really diverse. And I was like, I'm glad to see, like, they care about some issue, number one. Number two, I think that the Michael Brown case in Ferguson, Missouri, Eric Garner case, they're not about those two guys, right? They're about a sense that people don't understand how your average black kid feels like they can be victimized. And so the hopeful part of it is that now you have this conversation that's happening. I think people's eyes were open when they said, listen, Eric Garner clearly wasn't a Boy Scout, but you watch what happened on a tape, and people's opinions were formed. And I think it started this discussion. So I actually think it was an important moment. I don't see it as all negative. It seemed to me to be a really important moment that drove people out to say, like, we have to think about what is okay and what's not okay. You know, how do we feel about somebody not being indicted after you watch someone being choked to death in a videotape? I think it's an interesting time, actually.
So you have some sense of optimism that there will be a productive national conversation.
I think the fact that people are, for the first time, and not only black people, but white people are saying, oh my God, well, Ferguson was a case where it was the police officer's word against people who were witnesses, right? So it just, there was no, but here was a tape. And I think that the fact that it started this conversation is actually a good thing, because the whole stop and frisk movement has been going on for a long time, and people have just felt very understood. I'll tell you a great story. When we did our first Black in America, now almost 8 years ago, you would talk to black families, and they would tell you the story of sitting down with their 11-year-old boys. And they'd say, we have the conversation. I was like, what's a conversation? When my son turned 11, I sat him down and we said, this is how you deal with the police if you're stopped. And whether they were a wealthy family in Hollywood, whether they were a middle-class family, whether they were a poor family, they told you the exact same, almost word for word.
Right.
This is what you do. And they're talking about, this is how you survive an interaction with the police. And white families would say, well, we have that conversation. We tell our kids this is how you're respectful to the police. And I was like, no, they're saying, this is how you don't get killed. This is how you survive. And so I think now people are actually beginning to understand that conversation. 8 years later, I think that's a really big step.
So you think, well, let me be blunt about it. You think white people are beginning to gradually understand what black people have understood for a long time because it's been happening to them? Do you think that there's now that a window has opened and they're and
I do.
Okay.
I think that people who looked at the videotape said, you know what? If Eric Gardner, there was no evidence that, in fact, that he had been selling loosies or those loose cigarettes. But let's say he had. Let's say he had been selling hundreds of loose cigarettes.
Right.
Do we, as Americans, think it's okay to tackle someone and choke them to death for that? I think people would say that's not okay.
Right.
Should you handcuff him? Should you take him in? But the policy in New York is to arrest people who are selling loose cigarettes. That's a broken windows policy. That is, the police officers were following policy. So we have to ask ourselves, is that what we want? So yeah, I do. I think it's the first time people thought, well, wow, can that actually happen?
Right.
Clearly it did. We all saw it. Can it happen that it doesn't even merit going to trial? The basic fact-finding look at it?
Right.
Clearly it did not. I think that was shocking for people.
So there's something. Well, let's give Soledad a round of applause for coming up with something positive to say about the Eric Garner case, which I think in the Olympics that's like a triple axel to be able to achieve that. No, but it is like, as in everything bad that happens in our country, that whole thing about a crisis being an opportunity. Like I don't feel now, if I can be a downer again, and this is now going to be like a game show where I'll say something really down and then you try to. I don't feel that the national conversation about guns has gone very well.
No, that's been a shame. That's been a shame. That's been
Yes.
really a tragedy. And I spent a lot of time covering the Newtown school shooting, and that's just devastating. And that actually I find very disappointing because there are these pivot points. There are these moments where you can leverage that conversation when everybody in the country seems to be listening. And we blew it. We didn't do it.
Well, I have said this for a long time. I think we need stricter controls on the buying and selling of politicians because that has been the core problem. You're allowed to buy these guys, no background check. You just waltz in and you just get them. It's a disaster.
Listen, I covered the guy in New Orleans who had $80,000 wrapped in tinfoil in his fridge. So you're not exaggerating at all. Like who does that?
Oh, I forget. What was that guy?
Remember
Who was
Jefferson,
that guy?
Mr.
That's right.
Jefferson, yeah. He had,
That's
and
right.
his quote was always some version of, "It'll all come out later. It was perfectly legal." You're like, what? $80,000 wrapped in stacks in your refrigerator?
Who among us doesn't have that in their fridge? It's a good place. It's a good place to have it. All right. Well, so guns. We kind of struck it. There's nothing really happy to say about that.
No.
But that's okay. That's okay. I want to talk about a story that actually is making me very happy right now. You may disagree with me on this because we talked a little bit about it before. It really comes down to this whole development of the midterms and what has happened since the midterms, because there was all this anxiety among people who like the president. I'm one who, on the whole, is a fan of the president. There was all this anxiety about what would happen in the midterms, and Democrats were steering clear of Obama, and we were headed for sure disaster. And then, sure enough, sure disaster happened. I mean, they really got their asses kicked.
Was predicted, yeah.
So that was, I guess, kind of the bad news. But the good news, I guess, is that out of those ashes has arisen a phoenix, which is Barack Obama in his new incarnation as Barack Fuck Y'all Obama, who I just love this guy.
A little
and,
freeing, right?
And Barack F.Y. Obama is getting some stuff done. And I actually, it's funny because, one thing, if you really want to get people to write a lot of hateful comments on Facebook, all you have to do is list some good things that the president has done.
They just say, thanks, Obama.
And it'll be immediately,
That's it.
thanks, Obama. But actually, I mean, he's in a tough bind where, he, was trying to deal with this Congress who, among other things, people were saying he wasn't born here. That's tough to really collaborate with people who say you are not a legal citizen of our country. I don't know where that conversation starts, really. I mean, I don't know. I think, considering he wasn't born here, he's done an amazing job. Like, he's figured out our ways. He's learned to mix with us.
Yes, I always say he's a terrible socialist. He's always, being accused of being a socialist.
Right.
You're like, wow, he's an awful socialist.
He is the worst socialist.
All the work that he's doing with Wall Street, he's a bad socialist.
The worst socialist ever. But, I mean, he's in a situation where he doesn't, he has an extremely hostile Congress, but he seems to have been freed by the failure of the midterms.
Right,
I mean,
once the worst thing happens, right? The worst thing happened. It was predicted, everybody was anxious, and then it happened. And now it's like, well, what you gonna do? Let's talk immigration.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And he, I think that was great. I mean, I think we have, a climate change deal. That makes me happy. I don't know what's gonna become of that. But it's fascinating because, you sort of wonder, there may be a lesson in this in politics. Like, was the attempt by Obama, a lot of people would say it wasn't conciliatory enough, but was even playing ball with these people for the previous 6 years that valuable? Was there any point in it?
Oh, I think a lot of people would say that he came to that late, that's not the game that the other side was playing. I think there's lots of critics of the president who feel that he was trying too hard to get together.
Right.
And so it's a very divided, as you well know, a very divided, Congress. And the American people keep, right, on one hand, just complain, oh my God, throw the bums out, they're awful, and then they elect in, like, they actually create a system where there will be gridlock.
Right.
It's the most incredible thing to continually see. So yeah, I think you're right. I think he's got this great opportunity in the next 2 years. It'll really depend what Hillary does, right? I mean, whether he's teeing up Hillary and everyone's at every point saying, well, what's Hillary saying? What's Hillary thinking? But yeah, one hopes that once you're a lame duck, you're free to do whatever you want.
What do you think we can, we'll get to Hillary in a moment, but what do you think we can expect from him? What do you think is on his
Listen,
agenda?
Immigration, I gotta tell you, if they cannot solve, do you see that interview that, I think it was Univision, he did an interview on, they were just ripping into him. I think that, once they're at this phase, right, they have to be thinking legacy. What's gonna be written about me, in the history books. And so I think he's gonna...
I think about that every day with my work. I take it very seriously.
So I think he's gonna have to really think about that. And I think immigration, is gonna be a real challenge for him. I think he's gonna have to do something on that front.
Mm-hmm. But how much can he do with, is there a deal anywhere in sight that could be?
I don't know. There's no deal, right? I don't see a deal coming, really. I really don't. I think they're so divided. And plus, there's no longer, what cable television has done, has created a scenario where there is no upside to going into a back room and slogging it out and figuring it out, right? The value is in being able to come out to the cameras. In fact, sometimes people blow off the meetings to come out to the cameras to talk about what a jerk the other guy is.
Because they want the split screen of two people screaming at each other.
And that's valuable for re-election. You come across, you're really constantly talking to your base. So the old days of let's go in the back, let's figure out how we can both win and negotiate this has really gone away. There's no value in sort of being that moderate who can get things done because your base won't necessarily support that.
Okay, you teased us with a Hillary reference.
Sure, and, she's not running.
And we're now moving on. The next election cycle is 2016. I actually would like to do an informal poll with our audience. How many people in this audience are quote unquote ready for Hillary? Well, you know, the 92Y tends to be a bellwether in these matters. So, but actually, how many people in this audience are not ready for Hillary? I'm curious. Oh, you see?
I think it's a bellwether.
That's interesting. Well, you know, Hillary Clinton is headed for sort of a sure coronation. What could possibly go wrong with this scenario? I somehow do not believe. I think there are going to be bumps in the road.
Oh gosh, for sure.
I just feel I'm not feeling a lot of super excitement about Hillary. But
they're trying really hard, right, not to be a front runner, because being a front runner is bad. So you got to do everything you can to not be a front runner, but also not lie to people when they ask if you're running for election, right? So you have to be like, well, I'll let you know if you'll be the first to know, but you won't actually say no, right? Because that would be lying, and you can't say yes because then they start gauging where you are in the race. So you have to kind of just laugh about it.
And she's doing a lot of things to make herself more likable and approachable, like saying she was poor when she got out of the White House. That was a good. And I was like, man, keeping it real, Hillary. I was like, you know, all this time I thought that like you were a millionaire, and no, you probably just had hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I think that is the key thing. Where people do well and where they do poorly is in those unscripted moments, right? If you remember Hillary's first video that she released, she had a child in. You remember back there was a video and she like one point leaned in and like grabbed a child on the shoulder, and I remember thinking
was this with Jay-Z? No. Oh no, that was Beyonce's video. I'm sorry, it was different. I was confused.
Remember thinking like it was so.
She grabbed a child?
No, she didn't grab it, but she was trying to be like, and I'm a mother too. touch small, child. And it was so inauthentic. I think it's a real problem for politicians to, it's those unscripted moments that really show who you are. We always call it the toss to weather, right? Like, it's in the toss to weather that you figure out if someone's funny or they're stupid or whatever it is, because it's unscripted, you're on your own. And at that moment when she does this, like, awkward hug, you're like, well, you actually are a parent. Like, why are you being so awkward with this actual, like, it's weird. You shouldn't have to do that. And I think it's very hard because her husband is a natural.
Right.
And I remember covering Al Gore, who had a similar problem. There was a tornado.
I think I remember that he had sort of a problem
but he couldn't
impersonating a human being. It was a challenge.
It was so difficult. I remember covering him. He had come in. I was covering some tornado had happened, maybe in Alabama, and he landed, and he walked around and met people, and he was vice president at the time. They blocked the traffic. They were pissing everybody off. He stopped to shake hands, and everyone's like, I couldn't get in to get to my house. I mean, it was just a mess. And so what should have been a completely great evening news photo op, right? I feel your pain. It's going to get better. America supports you. Was just like, can you believe that he came and landed and gave a long speech? I mean, it was just a hot mess because he just didn't know how to deal with actual, human beings who were actually grieving. Like, he was like, they wanted to hug, and he'd kind of put his hand out, and they'd be like, oh, hand out, and then he'd hug. And it was just a mess. He couldn't do it. And it was those moments that were really where your people can't help you. Like, you just have to go in and execute on it and make it happen. He just couldn't do it. It was really hard. And I think that's where people felt like he's not good at it. Hillary's husband is a pro. I think he likes it. I think he genuinely, it is fun for him to go to these things where he can, go and glad hand people. And I think it's not.
It's good if he leaves it at that, though. I mean, I think.
You'll notice I was very careful with what I said. But I mean,
he is a people person, and that's awesome.
Yes. And we'll leave it there.
We'll leave it there. That's good. That's good cable news training.
Yes, isn't it?
Gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there. I always thought that if Jesus came back on CNN, they would do a split screen with Jesus and Satan and have them debate.
That's right.
And then after 2 minutes, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it
exactly,
there.
Exactly. Hang on, gentlemen. There's a car chase we need to cut away to. You guys, can you stand by?
Jesus, can you stay? Yeah, I can.
Can you stay through the break?
Yeah, I'm not needed anywhere right now.
And then invariably, because the car chase would get good, you'd be like, I'm sorry, Jesus. I'm going to have to let you go. Looks like we're taking the car chase full, but thanks for being with us.
That's right.
If you do any miracles, we'd love to have you come back on the show.
That's right. And by the way, we're not doing 90-second pop today either. That's canceled. You know, it's funny, you were just saying about Al Gore. I think my favorite story about any politician who had difficulty sort of with that human touch was George H.W. Bush when he was running for president against Bill Clinton. And I guess they did some focus groups showing that he was coming off in his speeches as not seeming to care about people enough. And so the way he solved that problem was by inserting this line into his speech. Message, I care. Just love that. I just think that's a great solution. Well, let's end on a hilarious note and talk about the Republican field for 2016. Something we can all enjoy. Those debates, I'm looking forward to them. That is going to be like a sociopath super buffet. That is just going to be, I cannot wait.
Well, the primary is the best,
yes,
right?
I mean, let me see if I can run them down. Michelle Bachmann, sadly, I don't think has shown any signs of doing it.
Wild card.
A wild card, you never know. Sarah Palin is not a candidate, but she says she might just do it just to kind of let her voice be heard, because we really never hear her voice, and that's a useful thing. But that
raises speaking fees, so
yeah,
yes,
exactly. It's good for the brand. I guess Rand Paul, who, you know...
He's working hard at that right now.
At being a candidate.
Yep.
Rand Paul, Ted Cruz.
That will be awesome.
This is sounding...
That will be
This is sounding like an episode of Big Brother or something. You know, it's just like these crazy people in the same house. And I guess, miraculously, the former governor of Texas is talking about doing that again. That, to me, I don't know. It's sort of like, that would be tantamount to being caught masturbating in a theater and then saying, I'm going back to that theater tomorrow. Like, he had a drunk blackout on national TV. I mean,
which is why I support his candidacy.
You do?
As an anchor woman, yes, I do.
Oh, I thought as a drunk American.
No, as an anchor woman.
As an anchor woman?
That makes for great TV.
It was a great moment because, I mean, it's been made fun of quite a bit, but I mean, I love that he, you know, had this list of 3 things and could not remember the 3rd thing, but it was his own list. It wasn't like somebody said, you know, name the 3 daughters of, you know, Queen so-and-so. It was like, this was a list that he had custody of, he brought in there, and he could not remember number 3.
I'm telling you, yes, I support that on TV
You
again
do.
in 2016. Yes.
Well, then I suppose you will also support the candidacy of Chris Christie. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that
he'd be enjoyable to watch.
I think that you're going to have a really, listen, the primary will be fascinating, right? Because primaries are just craziness. You're pitching to a group of people who are completely different than the actual group that's going to do the voting.
Right.
So it is the most amazing thing because people have to make all of these over-the-top, you know, committed statements, and then immediately after the primary turn, and take them all back, right? Because you can't get elected from all of those statements you just made. I mean, really, Mitt Romney was a great example of, really, he spent the rest of his time trying, you know, as a candidate, trying to dig his way out of things that he had said.
And, you know, there's some talk that we might see that Romney magic again. That would be awesome.
I would support that as well.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Well, if he runs again and wins, it will show that you can be elected after telling half the country to go fuck themselves. So that will be, again, progress, I think, for all of us. But, well, look, it's going to be fun. It always is. And Soledad, it was so much fun.
Pleasure
being with
was
you.
mine. Thank you.
We're going to have to leave it there.
Love it.
Soledad O'Brien.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Mwah. Oh, come on, love. Show her love. Thank you very much. I actually had never met her before. I'm just that good an actor. Okay, folks. Oh, this is the time when I get to see people leaving in a huff. No, I get to field some questions from you. This is the end of the year, and we have some microphones being passed about, I guess. And so I'm going to have to sort of use my supervision to see who's talking. I think a microphone is being given to this woman over here. Yes?
Jeb Bush is going to run?
Do I think Jeb Bush is going to run for president? Really? I would support Jeb Bush taking up painting. I would. I think that would be, I think there's talent in the family. No, you know what? I think, again, just in terms of a brand, it goes back to that masturbating in the theater thing again. It's like, we didn't do so well with the previous incarnation. So are they going to say this one, this is the smart one? I just don't know. But Jeb Bush, I think when people are sort of I think they look at him and he seems kind of middle of the road. The Republicans always go for these kind of establishment candidates that they think are electable. But when you really look at Jeb Bush's career, I do not see him as at all like a steady hand. Do you guys remember in Florida that crazy Terry Schiavo case from years gone by? That was the woman where they were fighting over, she was in a vegetative state and they were fighting over her life. And there was actually a point in that Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida at the time, and he actually sort of flirted with the idea of adopting her, as his child, to settle the situation. And I actually, at that point, went to my estate's attorney, and I added a codicil. It's sort of like a do not resuscitate kind of thing, where if I'm ever in a vegetative state, I cannot be adopted by Jeb Bush. So that's the way it is. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Huge fan. I have always
Huge fan of your sweater.
Of my sweater, yes.
It's awesome. But thank you. That was rude of me.
I've always wondered, as a comedian, but also as someone who actually cares about our country, do you prefer having Republicans in power because it's easier to make fun of them? Imagine seeing President Chris Christie, and making fun of him every day. Would that just be like a dream come true or an actual nightmare?
That's a really good question for those, and thank you very much for your kind words too. The question is, as a comedian, but someone who also cares about my country, that was very generous of you to assume that. I guess I've never really thought about it, but I guess I do care about the country in addition to being a comedian. It's funny. When George W. Bush was president, I had just started the Borowitz report coincidentally. It wasn't timed to his presidency, but it was actually a good time. It was like buying Apple early, because let's face it, those 8 years were kind of like shooting fish in a barrel. When you had a guy who was one long, blooper reel, it didn't require a lot of effort. But I remember when he was leaving office, and we looked at the smoldering ruins of the country as he left. And I and a bunch of other comedians like Jim Gaffigan and Mike Birbiglia, we were actually doing shows for Obama. We were actually hoping that somebody we liked would be president. So I guess that's kind of your answer, is that we like to make jokes about whoever is running the government. But on the other hand, I guess I do care enough that I wanted somebody who, had a tendency to use complete sentences in the White House. He seemed to be a sentient human. I thought that would be an improvement. But what's really interesting is that I actually think the Obama years have been so much more fun to write about, because Bush was too easy. Bush was the same joke over and over again. And it was sort of like, Dumb and Dumber. It was just it was too easy. And there were things, the war on terror actually provided some interesting things, or as he pronounced it, the war on terror, which I loved. I loved everything about the war on terror and the color-coded terror alerts. I loved that. And I just also loved the whole idea of, and we were very uncritical about this, but I loved the idea of declaring a war on terror, not terrorism or terrorists, but actually declaring war on a human emotion. It was like, if we get rid of terror, what's next? Shyness? Shyness! Shyness is going down! But like people were very uncritical about that. And actually, you know, that was kind of the Democrats' fault too, because, you know, the whole Iraq thing, and that's still coming home to roost. And the Democrats kind of were such pussies. They just kind of rolled over and let that war happen. Hillary has something to answer for that too, of course. But the Obama years, I think, have actually been more interesting to write about just because the crazy opposition to Obama, and I didn't really want to bring up the whole race issue again, because Soledad and I discussed it so fully, but I do think a lot of the bias against Obama comes from the fact that he is part Irish. I do think that the hatred of Irish in this country is really dies hard. It really does. But no, it's, you know, it's the you know, there's a great, and then I'll get to the next. I'm sorry, I'm answering your question too loquaciously. But there's a great Will Rogers, who's like one of the all-time great political comedians in the early part of the 20th century. He had a great line about political satire, which is he said, you know, there's no trick to being a humorist when you have the whole government working for you. And that's so brilliant, because that's why Jon Stewart can do his show every night, and Colbert and John Oliver. It's just, there's just so much stuff out there. And it sort of doesn't matter who's running, because somebody or other is going to be doing something horrible. So thank you for your question. Who's next?
I think I am.
Where are you?
I'm over here.
Over here does not really answer.
Back
Can you
row on the ground floor.
Over there. Oh,
Hey,
way
hey.
back there. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you
Yeah,
very much
sorry.
for being here tonight. My question actually riffs off some of the things you were just sort of talking about in the vein of Jon Stewart and Colbert and Oliver, and that whole sort of wave of comedic social commentary and political commentary that's been going on. I was wondering if you could speak to maybe the role you see your humor having in potentially changing how people are thinking about those things. I mean, obviously I'm a big fan, I'm here, but I'd just be wondering, you know, your thoughts on, you know, do you see having that same kind of impact that, you know, those guys are having on TV? Is that something that you're, you know, hoping to change people's minds, or is it just, I'm a funny guy, this is great, I get paid to do this, and, you know, this is a wonderful job? Or is there sort of a larger impact that you're trying to make with your humor?
That's a good question. You know, it's funny, people sometimes will, because I write about the news and I seem well-informed, I create that illusion. People sometimes think that I have some greater, you know, cause, or that I think I have influence. And some people have even said, you know, have you ever considered running for office? And I always say this to them. I say, you don't understand my role. I am part of the problem. And I just tear down. Like I do not have solutions to anything. And I mean, I have a couple of solutions that are very unworkable, but because they involve deporting members of Congress. But seriously, all I do is criticize and tear down. And, you know, in government, you know, with that attitude, the farthest you will get is like Senate Majority Leader. That is as far, that is the ceiling. That is the ceiling. But, you know, those guys that you described are in a much different category, because their influence is so much wider, because they're on television and they're these superstars. In my little corner of the world, like, I really am just honestly expressing myself. That is, if I feel like I've expressed myself, that to me is mission accomplished. What people take away from that, I'm pleased when people say, you know, you made me laugh and that made me feel better because I had such a shitty day today. That seems like the biggest accomplishment to me, and it would never occur to me. I think comedians really kind of overstate their importance when they think, it's like, yeah, I saw an awesome clip on TV today, and so that's going to change the way. I mean, I think to some extent you can educate people, and I think especially John Oliver does such a great job of muckraking and really, you know, digging in deep on these issues, and I think really educating people, which I think is great. But influence, I don't know how much any, sadly, I think that the influence in our politics is still mainly being done by huge corporations and billionaires. I really do think, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think that's, if you want to talk about influence, I think the Koch brothers versus little old me, it's not much of a competition. But thank you for your question. Excellent question. Yes, sir.
Now that he's back in the news again with the release of the Senate report on the CIA, I was wondering if you had any comment on our friend Dick Cheney.
Do you have any comment on Dick Cheney? I've really been laying off Dick Cheney because, what can you say about him? I'm just glad he's not president anymore. It just was like, such a disastrous thing. But I mean, I honestly I've written a lot about Cheney, and I just love this guy who does not have the capacity for regret. I think that's an amazing thing that only some, probably there are some alien life forms who are capable of that, who have no sense of most of us, in our lives look back on things we did, even if it was just buying a Betamax instead of a VHS, most of us will look back on something and say, shit, I should have done the other thing. But few of us have actually invaded the wrong country. That's compared to a fuck up at Best Buy, that is way worse. But he has no regrets. He thinks Iraq was a great idea. He thinks that torture was a great idea. And he is just going to say, I have no regrets, as the white hot flames of hell lap up the side of him. So it's going to be, to the end, Dick Cheney you gotta kind of admire him for that. I mean, he just, he's an amazing fellow. We have some more time. Who is next?
Hi, Andy. It's right here.
Right here again, okay. And do we have a microphone up in the balcony? Will the balcony be able to ask questions, or are they just going to be mute, like Clarence Thomas up there? They're just going to be glumly listening in. Is there a microphone up for the balcony? No? Yeah? Get your shit together, balcony. I'm not getting a sense of a consensus from you. What? Okay, well that is fucked up. After this question, I don't care what the 92Y says with their live cast and that bullshit. You guys are going to get to shout out a question. Are you with me, balcony? You with me? All right. It is getting fucking ugly here with all this rabble-rousing. Okay, but first, down in first class. How are your cocktails working out, ladies and gentlemen? Can I fluff your pillow? This gentleman with that deluxe microphone.
Yeah, thank you.
And caviar canapes.
Andy, thanks for your comedy, and I'm a great fan, but I've got a frustration I have to share, and I wonder if you share it also. Where's Joe Biden? I feel like Obama's squandering a big-time comedic resource, and I just would like to hear your comment.
Yeah, Joe Biden, I agree, Joe Biden he's a funny guy. The problem is, I think the problem with Joe Biden as a target is that people really kind of like Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden is like the uncle who just, shows up and just blurts things out. And my favorite, and it's also, I find with Joe Biden, because I've tried very unsuccessfully to write about Joe Biden. And I think one of the problems is that Joe Biden, as he currently stands, is so entertaining that it's very hard for me, at least, to try to improve upon the actual Joe Biden. Can I just share, this is not a joke of mine, but it's my favorite true Joe Biden anecdote, which is that when he ran for president the first time, which I guess was 1988, was that it? And he was really a promising candidate until it came out that he had plagiarized this speech from this very famous British politician named Neil Kinnock, who was a member of the Labour Party. And they had all of these really embarrassing side-by-side clips showing Neil Kinnock's speech and then his speech. And they asked Joe Biden what he thought about this controversy, and he said, "I think it's much ado about nothing." I just love that. And then he said, "Look, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Call me Ishmael." Okay. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take a question from the balcony. Yes. And you can just shout it, and I will, for the purposes of live cast streaming, I will repeat the question. Who's got a question up there? Yes.
Do you feel like there's, I know you're not full of solutions, but do you feel like maybe there's a way for,
Come on, balcony. This is your shot.
corporate contributions?
Oh, I love this question.
With the upcoming election, with all the money that will probably come in towards a conservative candidate, is there a solution for young people sort of like me to sort of have our voices heard against all of that money?
Well, in terms of having your voices heard, you're sitting in the wrong section of the auditorium. So you may want to establish a super PAC next time to buy you an orchestra ticket, which would be helpful. But no, you have a great question. And look, you said the conservative candidates. This is an issue where I'm actually very bipartisan, seriously. Like, I actually am against the way money in politics is being spent on both sides, on Democrats and Republicans. And I'll tell you, I earlier alluded to the fact that I don't have many solutions, and I have a few that are very unworkable. But this is actually the only solution I have to a problem that I really like, and it is an unworkable solution. But can I just share this with you? I am actually, it's the only constructive thing I will say tonight and that I will ever say, okay? So just hear me out. The reason why we have so much money in politics is it's very, very simple. It all goes to one thing, and that is TV advertising and radio, period. That is why you just see millions and billions of dollars. Our last presidential election, I think, was a $5 billion election. I mean, it's a good thing that our roads and schools are in such awesome shape, or I'd be pissed off that we spent that. But seriously, the only reason that money has such influence, you can talk about Citizens United and all that, but if there were nothing to spend that money on, the money would go away. So here is my solution, which is that a number of years ago, as a society, we decided that it was no longer acceptable to allow cigarettes to be advertised on television. And I think it's time for us as a society to decide it is also time to ban all political advertising. And because if you look at the numbers, politicians kill way more people than cigarettes. Because they invade the wrong countries and things like that. So now there's a little hitch with my solution, which is that it's a violation of the First Amendment. But there's a way around that, which is that if we really cared, and look, this is never going to happen, so this is just me, giving my pipe dream. But in other societies that are not like crazy wackadoodle societies, like Great Britain, for example, they have limits on how much political speech is on TV. They have a set time, and each party is allowed to make like a 15-minute statement, and that's it. There are no political ads, or they're very, very limited. So there is a precedent for this. The problem is, for us to do it with our Constitution, we would need a constitutional amendment. And to get a constitutional amendment through, you have to have it ratified by states. And guess how that battle will be waged? On television with billions of dollars. So the answer is, we are fucked. But excellent question. But no, in terms of, I'm actually not just this chorus of doom. as I said earlier, I've worked on political campaigns. You should work on a political campaign that you believe in. You're not going to stop the money from being spent. But for one thing, if you got more young people to vote, that would be great. So, you know, we're not going to remove money from the equation, but that's no reason to just sit down and say it's hopeless. So that was an astonishingly serious response. I apologize. We have time for, I guess, 2 more questions. Yeah, where? Here, of course. Our balcony? Okay, one more from the balcony. I think that's our quota. Yeah.
That it's simply a coincidence that not a single Republican office holder has spoken in favor of the Senate report on intelligence.
Well, first of all, I loved the oratorical style of that question. He said, I'll try to capture it for those who didn't hear it. He said, I believe you said sir at the beginning, but I don't know if you did, but I want to insert a sir because it sounded like there should be a sir at the beginning of that question. Sir, do you agree that it is only a coincidence that no Republican senator has come out in favor of the report on CIA torture? Good day, sir, I think is how you concluded it. No, I added that because I just thought for drama. Did he? Did he? He did? Well, because he was a POW. So, so he did come out in favor of it. That's good. That's good. He's been very consistent on that issue. You know, he actually went through torture, but for people who didn't go through torture, like his fellow Republicans, that would require something called empathy. So I think that may be at the core of this problem. I think there may be a lack of empathy. I just don't understand. I can understand if the report showed that torture was doing all kinds of awesome stuff and was preventing all kinds of attacks. Then at least it's a debate. But you know, right now it's sort of like, you know, the invasion of Iraq. Even though nothing was accomplished, it was a good idea to do it anyway. You know, it's sort of like, I don't understand the rationale of anybody saying that torture is a good thing for us to do. It would be a weird kind of moral discussion if there was all kinds of proof that that's what caught bin Laden and that's what stopped this attack and that attack. Then it would be kind of this, you know, difficult argument that some people would say, well, it's like, you know, one of those ethical dilemmas of like, well, do you know, harm one person to save thousands of others? But this seems like a no-brainer. It just didn't work, you know. So let's you know, try to stop it from happening. And the problem is, it sounds like the CIA is, you know, just this professional lying organization that will continue to lie and do shit. So I don't know. Again, I ended on a very depressing note. So I want another question that's really going to lift us out of that torpor. And actually, this will be our last question. And my only real sort of prerequisite for this question is that it be a question that sort of summarizes the whole evening and kind of synthesizes and brings it together in a way that when we leave here tonight, we're going to see the world in a different way. And colors will feel different to us. And so is there anyone? Yes.
That would be me.
Okay. Yes, sir.
It wouldn't be an end of your show without the in memoriam segment. Who are you going to miss? Who should we miss?
It wouldn't be like, since when have I done a fucking in memoriam segment? Like, what is this? Is this the Oscars? Who am I going to miss? That sounds, now we're ending on death. I don't think that does not seem like a happy ending at all. You know, oh, you know what? I'm just going to be a crowd pleaser and say I'm going to miss Lauren Bacall. How's that? Is that good? But not funny. So we're going to need another question to fix the damage that he created with that question. Yes, over here. This gentleman looks very promising. Wait for the microphone. This isn't the fucking balcony. You got to talk into the microphone. You know, that's Occupy Wall Street up there. They're all like, They're burning shit. It's like Burning Man right now. It's crazy. Yes.
What do you think about the Israeli government and their actions?
That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Good night. Mwah.